Dominic.
Sure.
Thank you so much for what you've been sharing so far. Now we want to
Sure.
get into a little bit of sort of what you've learned out of this journey you've taken, and also some advice.
Yeah.
Like, want to share to folks out there who may be contemplating this for themselves going forward.
Yeah.
So if you look back, like, what do you think you've gained personally and professionally out of making this bold career change for yourself?
I mean, professionally, everything. It's really changed my career quite dramatically. Um, what I get personally from it, in hindsight, I thrived off the self-respect and self-confidence and satisfaction that it gave. It boosted a lot of other areas of my life as a result. And I was able to springboard off that foundation to make some other changes in my life, and quitting smoking, for example, or picking up new hobbies, or learning a new language. I was able to use that same mentality to push on and do other stuff. So I gained a huge amount from it. It's not something I regret at all. And professionally, I'm now tracking down a path. It's not always perfect. It never always is. I think the grass is always greener. There are pros and cons to both. And so but I'm not tracking in the direction that I would prefer. And I think that gives me a lot of satisfaction and helps me day to day, particularly, in my family life as well. Now I've become a father of 2 since I've been here. And I mean, talk about a bold career change. Wait until you have kids.
Bold change in life.
Bold changes. We don't get much.
You cannot backtrack from that too.
No, that's that's permanent.
That's right.
Yeah. That's another conversation. But so I mean, a lot is the answer.
Yeah.
A huge amount.
And so what advice would you give to someone starting out in their career? Because there's a lot of this obsession of, like, I got to go land that perfect job out of university.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what advice would you share to someone who is sort of, coming out into their first job out of university?
Yeah. I mean, So I think the advice in line with what we're talking about is, don't be afraid to change direction and pivot. I mean, that's a given. That's what the series is called. So that's kind of accepted. And then the other one is, don't be afraid to take a step backward to go forward. I think a lot of us don't like the idea of maybe moving down a couple of rungs in order to progress further in an area at a faster pace. And I think that's perfectly acceptable. They prefer a kind of lateral move to go up rather than a downward move. I think the other thing is that I maybe would have appreciated in my early career is take a long-term view. We're not very good as humans of doing this, but try and think longer. Think 5, 10 years down the line rather than just next year or the year after that. And you'll find that you can adjust your steps accordingly. I always put the analogy of, it's kind of like most board sports, or where if you look at the direction you're going, your feet naturally tend to guide you in that direction. So being able to keep your eyes on the horizon, you can generally course correct pretty naturally as a result. And I think that's something that I'd give the advice of someone starting out. Yeah. I certainly got itchy feet as a young guy starting my career, and was pretty raring to change things immediately. And if I'd taken it a little slower and looked a little bit longer term, I could have saved myself some hassle. But I also enjoy that view now. I take it. It's something that I enjoy doing, is thinking, okay, well, what am I going to do in my next 5 years? What am I going to do in my next 10 years? Where would I want to be? How do I put in place the steps in order to make that happen, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a continuing process. It's not something that stops. Yeah. And so I think that would be my advice.
Okay, thank you. That's beautiful. And so what advice then would you give to someone who is actually considering a courageous career change, but is hesitating?
Yeah. I would say it's very natural. I think if you're not hesitating, you're maybe not thinking about it hard enough. What I would say is, don't let that hesitation overwhelm you. One of the exercises that I found particularly useful when I was hesitating on my particular choice was give yourself, do a thought experiment with yourself and run through the very worst case scenarios. Literally write them down and then go, okay, is that actually as bad as you fear it's going to be? How likely is that that's going to happen? Start to think probabilistically about it. How can you stack the odds in your favor? Are there steps that you can take now that will maybe ease some of that? For example, when I was looking at my own change, like I told you, I had like a kind of a sort of wide range of options to try and make the change, ranging from less risky to really risky. And I worked through from less risky all the way up and eventually ended up at the most risky option, but not after I'd tried all the ones in between. So that's a way that you can maybe sort of get comfortable with the decision that you're making. And I would also say and this is the same for those starting out in career, is don't underestimate the power of your own drive and motivation to do something. It is extremely powerful. And I think I was very pleasantly surprised with how hard I was willing to work in order to get to this particular place because I really, really wanted it. And I think a lot of us undervalue that drive as a way of mitigating risk.